All right, guys, welcome in to the Pioneer Trailblazers. I'm your host, Shane Brucher, and just want to thank you guys for taking the time to tune in and listen. If you do like the content, I want to ask you to like, subscribe, share the channel with others so others can be inspired, motivated. And here today, I have a very special guest, a friend of mine for some time now. His name is Jeff Neyens. Did I say that right?
Nines, close
Neyens.
enough.
All right.
Yeah,
I always wonder how to say that.
yeah,
Jeff Neyens with me here today. Jeff and I have known each other for about 4 years now.
yeah,
3.5 years,
4 years maybe.
something like that. Yeah. Um, so here we are. We're going to sit down and have a discussion and learn about who he is and what Jeff has kind of been through and stuff like that. So without further ado,
Yeah. My name's Jeff Neyens. I'm in recovery. Came out here to just kind of have a conversation about, life, recovery, and that kind of stuff.
yeah. So, well, I guess let's kind of I always like to start kind of in the beginning. Is so like what was your childhood like?
Yeah, so I think that's a really important part of a lot of people's stories, you know, like trauma, obviously, you can only hear so many stories of people, that have struggled with addiction and their stories, and it's, you know, never ceases to amaze me, like some of the stuff that comes out that, people have been through. I think it played a huge factor with me. I think, after being sober for about 5 years, I finally started going to a therapist, and after, 4 or 5 sessions, he was like, "Man, how could you not become an addict? Like, no way. Like, there's no other way I see that playing out with you kind of talking about, some of your childhood." So, um, you know, there was a lot going on. You know, uh, my mom, paranoid schizophrenic. My brother, who was 2 years older than me, was an undiagnosed paranoid schizophrenic for quite a while. Until he turned a little bit later in life. But there was a lot of behaviors and things that happened that I think was due to that just didn't show. It was bouncing around from state to state, relatives to relatives. My mom ended up spending a lot of time in mental institutions, in and out, cops knew her by her first name basis, that kind of stuff. And my brother was he was an angry person. He kind of got to see a little bit more than I did from even a little bit earlier, being a couple years older, before I could really see what's going on. But um, yeah, the childhood, there was a lot. I mean, it started there, and there was a lot of things that, of course, I didn't understand. A lot of weird situations.
So when you said your mom would go to jail from time to time or end up in an institution, where would you go at that time?
Well, I'd go to my dad was in the picture. Sometimes we would be over there or a grandma. My grandma did the majority of raising me.
Okay.
Um,
Mom's mom or dad's mom?
Dad's mom did, yeah, but my mom was, she's still alive to this day, and I talked to her. I mean, we went, about a decade without talking, but um, we have a good relationship now. She was just, very, very sick, and so she did. She kidnapped us and took us across, Tennessee. She and was just kind of all over the place. But the main thing was that she spent a lot of her life in a mental institution. She says she spent more inside the mental institution than outside.
Wow.
So they used to lock people up for a lot longer. Now they just kind of,
So
put you in
yeah, in
there.
and out.
Yeah, in and out. So that obviously had a lot to do with it. And then as I grew up, got a little bit older, um, my brother was diagnosed with schizophrenia when he was like 17, and so I was about 15. Um, but even before then, I think just with kind of not having much guidance in life and kind of being all over the place, and it was just me and my brother, but um, he was not a good influence. We were best friends, but he was also extremely abusive, and I think that was just because he just had a lot going on, like I said. But I just had this mentality, and it wasn't really like a conscious mentality, but it was basically like I'm gonna go out and just be the worst kid I can.
Yeah.
I caught my first felony when I was 12 for breaking into houses, and
Wow.
was using drugs and stuff at a very young age. So
Yeah. And I think a lot of that too, I mean, is like when you're a kid, it's attention. Like you're getting attention, doing things, you know what I mean? And it's like any attention's better than no attention. And I think it's easy to kind of just, I don't know, childhood does have so much to do with who we are, whether it's like we either repeat it or we go completely on the other side and like overcorrect even at times, but like you're describing like a real lack of stability in your childhood, with being moved here, moved there. Mom would pull you and take off running with you or whatever. And so you just start acting out, at your first chance. Um, but yeah, that's crazy. So a kind of a cool detail here about last year. I think Jeff and I were hanging out when I was still working at Chestnut. I know you remember this, but so he was talking about his brother, and then I was telling him we were having a baby because Danielle was pregnant at the time, and I somehow I don't remember how we got it all connected, but like he's like, "Well, what are you gonna name the baby?" And I'm like, "Hunter," and he's like, "That's my brother's name." You remember all this? It was
oh
like
yeah,
it was wild.
yeah,
Did your brother like just passed away?
yeah. He had just passed away. That was in March, the very end of March.
Yeah,
And so it was probably April,
yeah, it
beginning of
was a
April when we were
couple
having that
weeks.
conversation or something. Yeah.
Yeah, so he found out his brother Hunter had passed away, and then we had our baby while we were naming Hunter, and it all just came full circle. One obviously left, but another one has come, and it's
Yeah.
just I don't know. Details like that are kind of just cool
Yeah.
to link up, but okay, so childhood, 12 years old, you start acting out, getting in trouble. And then how does that journey continue from there?
Yeah, for sure. So, at that time at 12, I was already, like smoking cigarettes and drinking alcohol and stuff, the basics, and then it, kind of progressed, and I guess, maybe about 14 was started doing, like cocaine, skipping school, just all that kind of stuff. 15, 16 was just really, somewhere around that age, 14, 15, 16 of, started selling drugs, and um, got kicked out of high school got caught selling drugs. And it just kind of, like I said, I mean, I didn't care, you know what I mean? And I think a lot of it, like you said, was for attention. It wasn't really getting anything at home, but from friends and people in school, and you know what I mean? There was a lot of attention there, and hanging out with friends. And I mean, pretty much every crowd um, that I was in was, either on the same level as me, or I was, maybe a little bit worse
Yeah,
than
people were
most.
like, "Stay away from Jeff.
Maybe,
He's
yeah,
gonna take you down and get you're gonna get in trouble." It's crazy though. I'm thinking because I kind of like had not quite a similar experience because you started way younger than I did, but it's crazy how people look at you like the bad kid, but they don't realize kind of like the all that went into play. It's like, um, I don't know. Like a kid gets like in high school and starts acting out and stuff, but not everyone knows the story behind that child. You know what I mean? And it's like you might be hearing this thinking like, "Oh wow, like he started drinking and smoking 12 years old." But there's a lot of people that in a lot of families that's normal and that stuff is just there. Because I shared a podcast a couple days ago, my 4 years sober, but I started
nice.
drinking around like 10 years old. My dad, here's a Bush beer, just gave it to me. It was normal. It was like family culture and stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, and then it escalates and continues to go and then develops into a pattern of behavior and ultimately a lifestyle. But I think it's so important and kind of my history of being a counselor and stuff is like I always like to find out how the person became that person. I like to learn their whole story and make sense of their life and what they've been through because to me it explains it doesn't excuse their behavior, but to me it explains their behavior. And so the better I can understand somebody and just who they are and in their life and stuff like that, the more I can help them and the more really I could truly just care about them as a person. But that's why I kind of wanted what has led me to do this podcast is because I want people to see people's lives and people who do struggle that they know that like that's not that's not all there is. Like the struggle isn't it. The struggle is part of it, and it's a part of it, but it's not the end. Um, okay, so high school. What was your high school experience like?
Yeah, high school, you know, just it was just interested in partying, going to parties, skipping school. I was, I had friends and everything like that, and but I wasn't interested in school at all. I was interested in partying, and I mean, really, that's it. I mean, just going and hanging out with friends and partying, and and like I said, I think it was junior year, I got caught in selling some drugs at school, and they kicked me out. And then from there, it just took off. But I like you said, I mean, any kid that's acting out like that, it's not. They generally aren't coming from a good place. And a lot of the stuff in the childhood, is very summarized. There's a lot. It's a pretty loaded childhood, but that's a pretty abbreviated, but like all of us, I mean, we go through a lot of stuff. People that struggle with addiction have a lot of stuff in their past and stuff, and it is like just acting out. And I think, you know, talking to the kids early on that are the ones that are getting in trouble and all that kind of stuff is important because it's just going to lead to a life full of misery, which is where it led me to. So high
Yeah,
school wasn't much of anything for
that's
me.
what I'm like. I wanted to ask because I'm just so curious if, when you were in high school or you were going through whatever the phase it was, what do you think someone could have done to help you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There's a big part of me that thinks, I don't know if there would be any helping me at all. But I think that there always is, a solution to, maybe not necessarily, make everything perfect, but, help to a degree. And I mean, I think that punitive stuff. I mean, sure, there's sometimes you got to go to jail for what you did,
Hmm.
but just and we've come a long way since with stigma and all this kind of stuff with mental health and substance use. And I probably had both clearly, um, and so I think that if there was just a way to I got away with a lot of stuff. Like I stopped reporting to my probation officer when I was, like 13 or whatever, and they ended up just letting it slide. After doing some other stuff, but like a little more accountability. If I'd be able to court order to like a therapist or, getting some kind of mentor, I think a mentor would be a lot. My brother that was 2 years older than me, it was not a good mentor, nor was he, and I hate to talk about him, in a bad way, because since he's no longer here. But he, like I keep saying, he was sick, but he did a lot of bad stuff and stuff like that. So if I had a good mentor that was a little bit older,
Yeah.
maybe ideally, a peer, somebody that had been through some of that stuff, I think that would have been huge.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I actually seen on Facebook, which was really cool to see that St. Francis County has a program in their jail to where they're like rehabilitating people, like hands-on, like coaching them, mentoring them, and trying to, while they're in the jail instead of just like pure punishment, and just, discarded that they're actually trying to develop them. I seen that on Facebook, dude. It was cool
Yeah,
to see that. It was like the actual sheriff of St. Francis County was handing out certificates to them and like shaking their hands and stuff like that. Just like a world where we could actually like help each other, love each other, believe in each other again, and bring somebody back to life. Like even through the struggles or whatever is like, ultimately, I think we just need somebody to believe in us, and give us a chance. And it's like, the further you go down the road and whatever it is, committing crimes, drug addiction, whatever it may be, it's like a lot of times the harder it is to get out because you don't see a new path, or you don't see, like, I don't know, you just don't see the way forward.
yeah,
So I think having a mentor, like Jeff's talking about, a peer. So in the world of recovery, they have what's called a peer support specialist, and peer supports are like the backbone for recovery, because they've been through it. Like we've both been through addiction. We've been through childhood that had criminal activity, whatever, and it's like once you've gone through it, you're really able to, I really believe like you're prepared through the process. I mean, that's my view. That comes from like my faith and stuff like that. I believe God had to send me through it in order to understand it and then bring me out of it and then use me,
yeah,
because otherwise most people are like look down on people who struggle with addiction, or, even like homeless people and stuff. Like you don't know the person's story, and a lot of times I look at homeless people and I'm like, man, that don't look too bad, man. They don't have bills and all the pressure of life. I'm like, maybe that's it
yeah.
ain't too bad, but summer would be a little hard with the heat pounding on you. And
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, yeah, it's rough. And then, and you look at them and your first thought, for 99% of people is like, oh, drug addict. But you don't know what happened. You don't know. And even if so, then they still need help. And I think that like, yeah, the peer support thing, obviously, yeah, it's like anybody who's a peer working in the treatment field knows the value of a peer, and so do a lot of other people that have, came around and understood the value of a peer, especially somebody like yourself that, is doing counseling, as a peer, and, it's, yeah, it's invaluable.
yeah, absolutely. And so we love the peer, the peer community. We want to support that and, just give a shout out to all the peers out there. Keep going, keep making a difference, keep showing up. Really, I mean, that's really what I've kind of the big thing that's on my heart. Like I guess for this year or whatever is just keep showing up. I don't have to do nothing special. Don't have to be no one special. Just show up. Show up for people and be there for people, and that goes a long way. So Jeff, all right, take us through high school. You get out of high school. What happens next?
Yeah, so the very end of, high school age, I guess, about 17, um, you know, prior to that, I started dabbling in other stuff, but about 17 is where I started doing heroin. And that's when, that was the game changer for sure. Um, so life went slow but quickly.
Let me ask you a question real
Yeah.
quickly, just to specify. So when you say you started doing heroin, was that pain pills, medication? Was that actual, what was it exactly?
So, we like to spread awareness about how, you know, I think it's 80%, of people that, became heroin, fentanyl, um, addicts like started with pain pills, and how that whole Sackler family pumping out OxyContin to everybody and their mom, and
Late 90s, early 2000s.
yeah. And I just heard a story in the hospital. I met with a guy, with his story about that, which it was wild. But you know I wasn't one of those people though. I know the majority really are. They start doing pain pills, they get addicted to it, they try to stop taking it, or they get their prescription cut off or whatever, and they go through those withdrawals, and then they go to heroin or whatever. I had taken pain pills, here and there, and it just, I just kind of did whatever, came my way.
Mhm.
But when I really got my hands on heroin and really there was a little bit of that for a little bit, but very shortly after, I started using IV, and that is what totally changed everything. Um, you talk about 14 years later, what happened,
Yeah.
So, I got an apartment after, that and was able for a while to, work as a car detailer at a car dealership. Was able to, you know, keep up my habit, which my whole life was just going and getting drugs and going to work to make money for drugs and, but, that only lasted so long
Yeah.
before, you know,
Before you crash out and burn or something drastic would happen. So, did you ever overdose?
yeah, yeah. Um, so I've overdosed, I mean, a lot, but I mean, there's, for like a real true overdose, I've had three that were, that were really bad. Um, one in particular, and this, is kind of what happened is, once I had my daughter, she was a baby. She was like 1 years old, and I was living with her and her mom, and I overdosed in the bathroom, and that was the worst one by far. So, uh, it was my birthday, and for whatever reason, I did too much. I don't know. But I woke up 3 days later in the ICU. And so they kind of told me, what had happened. They found me. I had a friend who was, uh, he went and did like a county year and he was getting ready to go to prison for some stuff. And he could get released while they were waiting to sentence him his prison time for house arrest. And I let him come and stay with me. Had I not done that, I wouldn't be here because he stayed in the basement and he heard me fall off the toilet.
Wow.
But anyways, I woke up and um, went back home. All of my daughter's stuff and her mom's stuff was packed and they were gone. Um, and I would love to be like, yeah, and that was all that it took, and I changed my life. And but I looked at it and I just said, man, I'm already down. Like, what's the point now? And I walked in, looked around, and walked right back out the door. I mean, straight from the hospital, and just walked right back out the door to keep on using. But I did run into, I got pulled over, about a month later, and the same area, like blocks from where I was living, and I, was in like a 25 mile per hour, street, and cop pulled me over and was like, um, I pulled you over because I recognize you. He's like, you're not going to remember this because you weren't conscious. It was like, but I was first on the scene when you overdosed a couple of weeks ago. And I still had, I had a lot of drugs on me and stuff like that. And I was just like, here we go. Um, and he was like, man, you were dead. He was like, you were bleeding out of your nose and your ears. He was like, purple, which, whatever. He kind of went on this whole thing. And but then the point of the story is that he said, man, my brother is addicted to heroin, and he's lost his wife, his kids, his house, his job,
Wow.
like homeless, and he's on the verge of death. And he was like, dude, I'm not even gonna search your car. I don't care what you have on you. I just really hope that you get better.
Wow. Holy smokes.
Yeah, and that really planted a seed. And every time I do some trainings with first responders, and I always tell them about that, but it really planted a seed of like, that's like kind of what we were going back to with, just punishing people or trying to be compassionate. And it's like, that went so much further than throwing me in jail.
Wow.
Like, I just go to jail, okay, when I'm out, I'll just keep going. But just even a small conversation with a stranger.
Yeah, man, that's powerful, dude. That's so cool to hear those stories like that because, like, if you are a first responder, whether you know it or not, you have an opportunity to really make a difference in someone's life. And I want you to, thank you for your service and protecting our communities and, long days in your car a lot of times. But when, you are having interactions with people who are struggling, don't ever underestimate your ability to make a difference in someone's life. You know, because Jeff is firsthand witness that, you know, someone going the extra mile is kind of the intervention that started to tilt the axis of his heart. Um, you know, it's kind of cool. Also, too, you describe if you hadn't have let your buddy come over, you know, you possibly would have died because you fell off the toilet. No one would have heard you, but he heard you. And what I thought when I heard that was like, dude, you being kind is probably what saved your life. Like a kind act of letting somebody stay with you that probably had nowhere to go. Because I kind of broken down my situation in life too, and I found a lot of those moments where I got help was usually because I was helping someone else. You know, and it's just crazy
Yeah.
how that has a way of like tying in there. But
Yeah, it was weird. It was definitely weird. I mean, the chances, he really probably shouldn't even gotten the opportunity to get out, and the chance that I let him do that, the chance that yeah, he was there. I mean, and there's other instances, I mean, I overdosed in an alley in North City, and my head fell on the horn and my foot fell on the gas, but it was in park. So my car is sitting there, laid on the horn, the engine's revving all the way.
my
And the 911 call is, hey, there's a dead guy in my alley, and they bust out the window and stuff, and
God,
Narcan me, and it take me. But like, if I had just kind of slumped over or something,
yeah,
there's a lot of
wow,
there's a lot of people that don't make it. There's so many overdoses, and I'm sure both have lost a lot of friends.
oh yeah,
I
yeah,
lost a girlfriend to an overdose, and my two lifelong best friends, and um, but the people that are here that have gone through that, I feel like all kind of have a story of there's like this divine intervention or whatever it is, or
yeah.
just these circumstances that are,
The parallels and the coincidences that just yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, you were talking about, you know, being hunched over on the horn. Like I laughed. That's not funny. My first reaction always, even with like sad or bad things, is to laugh.
yeah,
Even when I used to get in trouble in school for doing something, I would laugh, and they would get so angry at me. Like it's only funny because you're sitting here today
right.
and no
Looking
one
back
got
on it,
hurt. Like
yeah.
no one got hurt, but like it's just like holy smokes, how did we end up in situations like that bad? Did you ever get so bad, like deep in your addiction that you just wanted to die? Like
Yeah,
just
yeah.
completely careless and were like just didn't care at all.
I was just talking to a mom. Her son was struggling with addiction. I was trying to get him into treatment, and we were just talking about this. It was yesterday, the day before, and it's like, oh yeah, like he's gonna die. He's gonna die. I'm like, well, I welcomed it. I was like, people after you overdose and stuff, like, aren't you, afraid you're gonna die? And I'm like, no, like, good.
Yeah,
Yeah. So there was you know, a lot of that where felt like you were better off that way.
yeah. You sure felt like, you know, such a failure when you're in addiction that like, you know, I was talking a little bit about earlier. It's like the path of return is like there's no way I could ever go back to level ground and start over. And that's kind of like the trick of addiction, is that it just once you get so far in it, it just I don't know, it's like you can't live without that thing, you know, but at the same time it's like you know deep down inside like that there's more to you and more to life. I don't know. That's the way I felt when I was like in my addiction. It was like I knew that this guy was there, but it was like, man, like I had sold myself, you know, and just made so many poor choices for so long. And it's like, man, I could never start back over.
Yeah,
I don't know if you could relate with that or not.
absolutely. Yeah. And you said you've got 4 years? You just
Yep.
celebrated 4 years?
Yep.
That's
Four
amazing,
years.
man.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah,
man. Thank you.
it's a big deal.
Yeah, it's such a big deal. You know, I actually thought about it earlier and I'm like, man, I wanted this for so long. You know, like even, ever since I got because I started my journey off with pain pills, Oxycontin
Oh,
pain
really?
pills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my actually my buddy had a girlfriend. Her grandpa was a doctor, so we were able to get these things pretty easily. And so my dad had been sentenced to life in prison, dude. When I took a pain pill, it was like everything just it all went away, like all the pain, everything. Missing my dad, you know, having to let go of him. was the hardest thing I've the two hardest things I've ever been through are addiction and then watching my dad go to prison for life. Were the two hardest things I've ever been through as a human being. But when I took those pills, and that's the danger with addiction too, is like if you've had a rough childhood or you've had experiences that are traumatizing and you do drugs or alcohol, it's like an escape. It's a form of escape that alleviates the pain. So that's why I believe like addiction is hereditary with trauma because it allows you to escape the feelings, the reality, all of it, and then yeah, but I don't know where I was going with that other than yeah, uh, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's like those, when you're young and you don't you can't like really rationalize and understand your feelings as you can as in your 30s, 40s or whatever, and it's like they got those emotions have like nowhere to go, all this stuff going on, and the drugs make it real simple because they just numb you,
yeah,
Um,
yep,
yeah, so it's a perfect medicine that's, you think at
yeah,
the time.
yeah, and yeah. So I just celebrated 4 years, and Jeff is how many years?
8 years.
8 years.
Yeah, it's been a while. I know you're bringing back memories, man.
Yeah, that's
Like,
good. Re-traumatizing them.
yeah.
But the good thing is now, like you get to a place where you are strong enough to handle your feelings. You're strong enough to handle the stress that life throws at you. It's not going to drive you back to your addiction. You've got healthy coping skills in 8 years, and I mean dude, that's awesome, man. And we were talking before the podcast just about our day and stuff, and Jeff was like, he's like driving over here. I was thinking about. He's like, man, I'm so far out of my addiction like I actually have to think what it was like being in there. Like, of course, yes, we have the experience of it all, but like, man, I have to like go in there,
Yep.
you know?
Yeah. It's like, and after talking about it, probably driving home, I got a, 50-minute drive home. It's probably gonna be like, start thinking about this and that. And, 'cause yeah, some people share their stories regularly and, I haven't done it in so many years, except little bits and pieces when I'm doing some trainings or something where it's just very minor, talking about like, oh, I overdosed, that's relevant. But yeah, it's so far behind, you know, it's a lot of it's kind of just move on and stuff. I mean, you always want to protect your sobriety, but um, yeah, a lot of that stuff's just in the past.
Yeah, it is too. And you do grow beyond. I think that's kind of like the message that I want to share is like you do grow beyond the addiction and the struggles and you grow out of it and it really does become just kind of a distant memory. But Jeff and I have had lunch quite a bit. Jeff, by the way, I'm going to brag on you a little bit here.
All right.
Jeff is an amazingly awesome, giving, hospitable gentleman. Like he brings me food on the regular, just very caring, and Jeff and I have kind of just really developed a friendship, and hearing him talk about his daughters, is so encouraging to me because like I love being a father. Like I feel like that's where my primary focus is at. A husband and a father, but like you've, really become a heck of a dad, dude. Just from stories you tell me and things we share and stuff like that, man, I think it's encouraging to hear.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man.
Yeah.
I appreciate that, and congratulations on your baby, man.
Yeah. Thanks,
Same, you
brother.
got a great family, man. It's some of the many blessings of recovery,
Yeah,
and
you can actually enjoy it.
yeah, yeah, it's a whole nother life.
Yeah, I think that was kind of our last conversation. I forgot what you had taken your daughter to a game or something, and we were talking about actually being able to enjoy it. Do you remember that?
Yeah, yeah, I don't remember what we were doing that I was telling you about, but yeah, I remember talking about that.
It,
Because yeah, yeah, we do a lot of stuff.
yeah,
You get to do enjoy it and not just absent-minded and going through motions or not being around at all. Yeah, it's great. It's great. I just had her 2 weeks, and spent did all kinds of stuff together, you know. So
Yeah. Well, and kids can be challenging too.
yeah,
Like it's definitely not perfect, but I think the key is, at least what I'm learning is like now that I've kind of grown up a bit, I mean, I'm not grown up, but like you're able to help others. Like, I can help my kids navigate certain things because I don't have issues of my own. I have issues of my own, but like they're not like super pressing. I can actually focus on other people and stuff like that and kind of target people and help people and stuff like that. But like, yeah, it's like if we were in addiction, we would never ever be able to do that. And
yeah,
it's just life after addiction is discovering, the blessings of life, really.
yeah,
What was so let's talk about early recovery. Like share some of your early recovery journey. So we know now you're 8 years into it, but take us back to like say take us back into that beginning part.
yeah, for sure. This one's a little bit easier to remember. I started getting a little more clear-headed, you know. Uh,
True.
yeah. So, it started with, um, I had never had any sober time. Even when I, had moved to try to get sober, I would be, blackout drunk every night and taking handfuls of pills. And I thought I was, pretty much sober. I thought I was doing great. And then it was just, moved to a new city, and it's a matter of, a couple of weeks before I start finding, harder drugs and stuff. But so it was just, I'd never really had that, time except for, a little bit of time where I had to go sit down against my will.
Yeah.
But I ended up in drug court, treatment court. Um, I guess it was about 11 years ago. Um, it was a 15-month program that I turned into 3.5 years.
Wow.
Because then I went through St. Louis City Drug Court. That was kind of the beginning of, they assign you a counselor. Started talking with a counselor, doing groups, meeting with the judge every week, doing calling the drop line where you got to go in and take a random drug test. Um, and I owe them a lot because I did not have a day sober for the first, 4 or 5 months of the program.
Wow.
And that
You were
was,
trying to beat the system.
I just couldn't stop.
Yeah.
I couldn't stop. I mean, when I first was given, the ultimatum of going to drug court. I'd been given it prior and I had turned it down. And then this time it was, well, you can do drug court or you would go to prison for a while. And I said, I'll do drug court. But I was just kind of buying time, honestly.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I'll just buy some time. So yeah, I just couldn't stop. But then going and talking with counselors and doing groups and all that kind of stuff, there's seeds that were started getting planted. And then, I finally went to treatment center. Um, and after, you know, getting in a lot of trouble with treatment court, they let me go a long ways, um, a very long ways, with a lot of getting arrested and everything else. And I think a lot of people would be like, oh, just cut them off right there. And I mean, I can't 100%, disagree with like how far I took it, and I'm surprised they let me. But I needed exactly as much room as they gave me because I finally got to that point where I got sober for the first time, and I had a couple of slip ups. Uh, I got detox and everything, and was sober for maybe 2, 3 weeks or whatever, and then I relapsed once. Got caught, went to jail for a week or whatever. There's a little jail sanction. And I did that a few times, and then it just stuck. And they made me go into sober living. I did not want to do sober living at all. I even lied to them twice, and got thrown in jail both times for lying that I'm like I'm in treatment or I'm in sober living. And they're
You weren't there.
yeah, they're like, let me call, make a call, and I'm just like, I'm not in sober living. So I tried to beat that when I first got to sober living. I still had, even though I was sober, I still had all these, terrible, you know, character defects or whatever you want to call them,
Yeah.
all these bad habits and ways of my thinking was still so flawed that, and so I said, okay, I got to go to treatment or sober living. I will show up, um, as late as possible, right before curfew, and then in the morning I'll wake up and I'll leave, and that's what I did because I didn't want to be there. Is you know, and then I kind of peeked through the window after I came home one night after doing that for a few weeks. Peeked through the window and I saw a bunch of people in a basement, the lights on, and there were a ton of people down there. Didn't know what they were doing. Come to find out, they were doing meetings every night down there.
Wow.
Started going to those, and everything started clicking. And started hearing. I went through Recovery House in St. Louis City, and that place, between treatment court and that place, saved my life. Some of those people there were amazing, and that really stuck. I ended up staying there for a long time. Even after the court order was lifted, I thought I'd be gone, and I think it was like 6 months that they made me stay there, and I was there for years. Ended up managing the house, and um, it just, yeah, I learned a lot there. I was going to meetings, doing 12-step stuff for a while. I was trying I did AA, NA, just did community stuff, did volunteering, um, and just kind of felt like, you know, every life was great, and I've gotten away from the 12-step stuff. I think people should do whatever, anything, just don't do nothing, choose a path, but nothing is not a path,
Yeah.
if you want to do 12-step meetings, I'm definitely not against them. I just kind of found, did therapy and
Grow up out of
did
it.
different things and yeah, and moved on. I like felt like I got a good stable, I got my own place finally.
Got a good foundation set.
Yeah,
And you were, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, so I kind of want to just go back and touch on a couple of things. So you said like and treatment court was a big deal for you and you messed up. And I was thinking about like you said like they let you get away with stuff but not. I was thinking about a term called grace. Like given grace. Like a lot of people don't really understand grace and what that means, but it's like grace is like allowing you to make mistakes and being patient with you while you're learning. And if you are, or know somebody who's in addiction and say you don't struggle with addiction, it takes patience to deal with somebody who's coming out of addiction, wouldn't you say?
oh my God, oh
Like,
my
like,
God,
think about the
most
parents.
stubborn
What about
yeah,
the parents? Because I deal with them all the time at my
yeah,
job and stuff. Like
yeah,
parents are calling me, like, "Hey, this person wants to do, detox. Shane, will you get on the phone with them?" I get on the phone with them. They don't want to do detox. Mom and dad want them to do detox,
yeah,
and I'm like, "Hey, listen, I hang on. I appreciate you. I'll work with them, but the amount of like heartache for loved ones who have to deal with someone in addiction is hard, you know." But you described, situational grace that was given to you while you were trying to learn, and it was just what you needed. And then when you, got out of line, you go to jail for a minute,
yeah,
And I was thinking how much of the recovery process is just being broken from our like rebellious will, like
yeah.
I think about that all the time.
Yeah, you just keep beating your head against the wall over and over, and eventually it's just like, man, there's got to be a better way.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure. Like you're broken. Like you think about like horses, like and stuff. Like they talk about a terminology when it comes to horses. Like you got to break a horse.
yeah,
Like and if you want to buy a horse that's already broken, it costs a lot of money. Because it's obedient and like it's not like gonna just run you through the barbed wire fence or whatever else. But like it's trained and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean that's quite a journey with treatment court, which I know anything in court is tough. I was in the court system for like 20 years with charges and just tickets, and man, golly, it's hard to get out of that. I feel like I think our justice system needs an overhaul. I personally believe that. I'm not going to run down that rabbit hole too hard, but
I agree.
I think
Yeah,
there could be a lot of more positive changes made. I think they will be. I think there will be some made in the future, especially if we can continue to get people recovering. Um, there'll be a dent made in that area. I think people in jail need to be reached, and I think they need to be taught and worked with more hands-on, like humans, as opposed to criminals and inmates. Now, I think there are some that are that too. So it's like I think the justice system has trouble in finding how to navigate that because it's not necessarily their role. But like what Jeff, what do you think jails would benefit from opening up to like peers coming in the jail even or
I mean, a ton. I mean, hear about, I know, a friend of mine who passed away, his dad goes to St. Louis County Jail and goes in there and talks about, just, his son's story and what he went through. And, he tells me that, they love it. And I've heard of others, stories of people going in there to tell their stories and stuff like that. And it's always the highlight of the day. Just like, I mean, even with, police officers and firefighters and EMTs and stuff that that I train. They have to do all these trainings. And they have like these 40-hour blocks where they got to do, and their favorite trainings are always the ones that we do when we come up and talk about
the real
our
life stuff?
personal history, with addiction, and start talking about our story, and they just love it. It hits home with them, and I think it's the same thing with people that are, in jail because they, for the most part, are sober.
Yeah.
So some of them, but they got some time to really, a clear head to really, um, you know, really make them think about some stuff. So I think the peers getting in there and having a chance when they're clear-headed
Yeah.
is big prime.
Yeah, absolutely. I got called in the hospital to go talk to an inmate. I've actually had two inmates recently, but one of them, he's been addicted to fentanyl, and his wife died a year ago. He had never done drugs ever in his life. His wife died a year ago, and he got into fentanyl and is addicted to fentanyl. And he told me, he said, I spent 2 hours with him talking. We were just chatting about everything. And he said, man, he said, the crazy thing is, because I was telling him about God and stuff like that and just talking to him about my story. And he said, the funny thing is, he said a prayer and he said, God, unless I get arrested, I can't quit. And he said it was 5 minutes later, he picked up his keys and he left his house. He made his down his street stop sign, made a right and ran that stop sign. Guess what happened to him?
Yeah, I got arrested.
He got arrested and then here I come to meet with them and stuff and just start talking with them and stuff. And man, it was such a cool conversation. And officer was there as well because they got to have an officer in the hospital while they're there because he's incarcerated and stuff. And like he was one of the coolest cops ever. I want to say his name and I don't want to say his name here,
Yeah,
but just shout out to him because he was like the inmate told me the impact that the police officer had made on him, by, well, he had to spend all day in the hospital room, but like, that's like going back. I said it earlier, I'll say it again. It's like first responders have a huge opportunity to make a difference in people's lives. So, don't underestimate your potential and ability, please. And it is hard too because you get burnt out. Like, so you've worked in recovery now for how many years?
um, 7. So after a year sober, I started managing sober living, and then did that for a while and did a couple other jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So talk about like what is it like? I'm not even going to say being in recovery, working in recovery. I don't think that's fitting, but like what is it's demanding.
Yeah, it
Like
is.
how do you feel about it?
I think that you really got to pay attention, um, to yourself and, because it is a high burnout job. For a lot of the jobs in the treatment field, are high burnout jobs. Um, I the sober living thing was great. I loved it. And then I went on to do a hospital outreach, epic program. Um, love that as well. But there was a point there where I got burned out, and that's when I switched jobs. But it's and you got to recognize. I think the difference, maybe just speaking for myself personally, between when you're kind of a little burned out and you just need to take some time off and go do something for yourself or whatever, and then come back and you're good, or are you getting to the end of your road with this job? I've never wanted to leave the field of addiction, and but you know, I got to a point where I knew that like I was just burned out of doing the same job and the same, people and the same, and so that's when I came over and switched to the job that I have now, working at a treatment center.
Yeah, I think that that's really good advice too, because like it could feel like kind of like that same scenario as addiction, like you're stuck almost, and doing the same things, all the time. You can be burnt out, but like yeah, like monitoring, where you're at and, kind of just where you're at. So like one thing I always struggle with, I've gotten so much better. I think working with Ryan has helped me a lot and just like I want to save everybody, like gung ho, like I don't know. I treat every conversation like it's the last time I'm going to see them. Like when they're at that point. I think I feel like I'm very blessed because I get to be with a lot of people who are in the darkest moment in their life. Like they're broken. And if you're willing to do a detox, like willingly wanting to do detox, you're there. Like a lot of them are there, And so I try to like seize that opportunity. And it could get exhausting, like just pouring out, all the time. So like in your recovery, what do you find is like refreshing for you? Or what do you find like rejuvenates you? What motivates you? What inspires you to continue to go?
Yeah. Yeah, and just a quick thought on what you were saying too. It's like if you're not in a good place and you're trying to help somebody, you're probably not going to be as effective,
Man,
So, you got to take care of yourself. But for me, what motivates me, is my daughter helping other people. I get a ton of value out of just like, helping other people for sure. I probably would be doing something different if that wasn't the case. Um, but for me, there's still mental health struggles there, that come up, time and time again, like off and on, occasionally pop in out of nowhere. So, for me, it's like going to the gym is, just a game changer for me. Just getting exercise, getting out of the house, having conversations, hanging out with people, like we're doing, being a part of community and friends and stuff like that. And there's just trying to, do things that I never got a chance to do. I'm still doing 8 years in,
yeah,
vacations that I never got to take and stuff like that. That I mean, that motivates me as well. I mean, a vacation, hey, I get to do this stuff today,
yeah,
it's still, a huge motivator.
absolutely. And that's such a good attitude that you have just towards life now. It's like surely it can't be as bad. I mean, like, granted, something bad could still happen. You know what I mean? But like, it's like the bad days are behind us, and it's like there is truly hope, for the future and stuff. Like you said, you still have your struggles, mentally and stuff. I struggle like really bad in the winter, like this time of year, like because it's like you can't go fishing, hunting is pretty much over. And it's like, okay, well, what now? Type of thing is like I don't know. I just always have some seasonal, like, I don't know, January, February until spring hits. And it might be like lack of sunlight, shorter days affect me really bad, but yeah, man, that's
But you can recognize that though, and so
yeah,
that's good. And try to do something about it,
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, of course, like when you are in recovery, um, you know, there's going to be some worry about, you know, relapsing or going back into addiction, and there's not a cure, um, and you know, when my brother passed away, I thought that, you know, the first when I, found him, the first thing that popped in my head was, to go get some fentanyl. Now I stopped like right around when fentanyl was coming around. So, but I know it's a whole different
Yeah,
ball game now. But that was the first thought that popped in my head, and it went away super super quickly, almost instantly. And it's just like there's just no appeal there. I know I can't sit here and say I know for a fact that I'm never gonna get high again, but it's behind me, and I just I don't want to be cocky and stuff like that, but I think it was a really good sign, that something like that can happen and I can get through it without, getting high.
yeah, absolutely. Because that's a big, you touch on a big point there is like that when something traumatic or dramatic happens in your life, it can be easy to turn back, and go back to what you know, really, So it's like you said, you never know what could happen. So yeah, we can't say like we're above it, but definitely moving on from it. But yeah, so I guess we'll close out here. And so I guess one question I always like to ask Jeff is like if someone watching this right now, maybe they're still struggling, what would be your message to them? Or what would be a piece of advice or what leave us with something?
One thing that's always stuck out to me that's, you know, that's touched me and really made me think about things is, you know, um, you can't, like, the feeling doesn't come first. You got to take some action. If you're struggling right now, and just don't know what to do and hoping that, you want to get better, you want to go away, you want to die, whatever, the case is, um, you've got to take some action and have faith, faith that taking the action, that is suggested to you or that from somebody that's in recovery or it's, whatever, or that is the obvious, like if you need to go into treatment, like, um, you have to take that action and it's not as scary as we think it is. I think that's a big thing, we build up in our head because of the drugs or the alcohol or whatever, is it's just this terrifying thing and it's never going to work out, and it's not the case at all. So just take that action
Yeah,
and the feeling will come. Things, better days ahead.
yeah. Man, I think that's a wonderful statement to leave off on is take the action. It kind of reminds me, I guess I'll share one little story was like when right before my life kind of drastically took a turn when I got sober, I had become very desperate for help. And I picked up my phone and I called somebody I knew and asked, kind of explained the situation I was in. I opened up. Like, and that was a rare thing for me to open up and like actually talk about stuff because I didn't want anybody to know I was struggling. Like, I wanted to hide it from the world.
For sure.
I didn't want anyone to see me like I thought it was bad to be weak, like to just be where I was at. And so, anyways, I picked up the phone and I called John. I'll never forget it. And I said, like, this is where I'm at. These are some of the things I've done. I feel so shameful. I can't believe I've become this person. And he gave me the wisest advice probably I've ever been given. And he said, why don't you just write a letter? And like that sounded so insignificant. Like, but I did what he says, like what you were saying, just start taking action. I took a step and it was like that opened up a whole new like portal for me. And it was just like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't even know why I share that. It's not like it sounds stupid, but like yeah, just do something.
Yeah.
Like I've thought about that since being in recovery, like because I am a faith person. I do believe in God and stuff like that, but like my thing now is like just give God something to work with. Like he'll make it all happen. Just do something, step out, like Jeff said, in faith, man, just believe and start moving and things will turn around for you. So um well, it's been a pleasure, man. I do want to say thank you for coming
Absolutely.
out
Yeah.
and taking the time to do this. And
Yeah, it's been
so
very cool. Thanks for having me, man.
awesome, brother. All right.